Ready for our jury? Sure. You can be. All right, Mr. Mullins, let's go get our jury. You may be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Was everybody able to follow my instructions and admonitions over the break?
Yes, sir.
All right, Ms. Kraft, you may continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, Doctor, I think where we left off is I had asked you about some statements that the defendant had made about her daughter, the crying, the gurgling, moving her limbs, and I asked you if those were all signs of life, and you agreed with that, correct?
Yes.
And that those indications, those statements that she made are not indicative of a stillborn child?
Yes.
And you would agree, based on her life experiences, she's probably more experienced with signs of life than signs of death?
Yes.
But you still discounted any statements she made indicating a live birth to come to your conclusions, correct?
I believe I said I weighed those in the overall picture.
You weighed those in the overall picture. Okay, well, I want to talk to you about a few more of the statements that you took into consideration in reaching your diagnosis, okay? You talked about a few things. I believe on direct, your exact, I want to make sure I get it right, your exact wording was, she described her daughter as really white. Do you recall saying that?
Yes.
Same question I've been asking you. Do you recall where you saw that in the transcripts?
On my page, it was page 22, after asked by Carter the appearance.
On the second interview then?
On 7/20.
On 7/20. And where was that at, you said?
Well, on my, I don't know if the transcripted copies are all the same, but it was the bottom of, I think it was the bottom of page 22. She's asked about the appearance. She says really white, I think.
And you said you believe that was on page 22 when she was asked about the appearance?
I believe that's what it was.
Your Honor, may I approach?
You may.
Judge, just for clarification, we've had, I think, 2 different transcripts of what's going on. Am I correct about this?
They change page numbers based on edits.
Your Honor, if I may. And I'm going to show him page 16, which I believe is the conversation
Okay.
he's referring
Okay,
to.
thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Doctor, I want to show you page 16 in the transcript from July 20th. Is that the conversation you're referencing? Because everybody's correct, the pages are off a little bit, we have to do some edits.
Yes, I believe that's what I was referring to.
That's the conversation you're referring to. And your recollection and what you testified to is that she, and what you based part of your opinion on is that she described the baby as really white.
I thought it said really white. That transcript says white, I think. That's possible a memory issue.
Doctor, you would agree on line 3 that Detective Carter asked when she came out or after, I'm sorry, line 6. So did you, I apologize, I'm looking at something else we're going to talk about in a little bit. Line 10, and what color was she when she came out? What does that say?
White, I think.
Not really white, correct?
Correct.
It's not even definitively white, is it?
Correct.
Well, they're all white because they've got sticky, goopy stuff on them. What about like her fingers or whatever? Were they pink? Were they red? Were they? I don't remember. Do you agree that's what it says?
Yes.
Is there anything in there that definitively says this baby was really white when she came out?
If there's no other, this does not, correct.
And if I represent to you, that's the only reference we have in anything in this investigation as to color of the baby, you would agree we don't have anything definitive on the color of the baby.
I believe you if that's what it says white, I think.
But you base your opinion on that. You took that into consideration, correct?
Correct.
We've already talked about, you said in your report, one of the other things you looked at was the fact that there were low amniotic fluids
Correct.
because there was no gush.
Correct.
And we talked about,
And she doesn't remember water breaking.
so we don't definitively know that the baby was really white, and we don't know if she knows if her water broke or how much came out, correct?
Correct.
You also made a statement when you talked about her appearance, when you said the things that you took into consideration when making your determination that baby Richardson was stillborn, that she was really white, and that her cord just snapped in two. And then you went on to say the baby's cord was around her neck and it snapped from the placenta.
And I believe I said it was detached when I asked about using the word snapped. So I believe I said it was, maybe it wasn't, I believe I agreed that maybe it wasn't snapped, but it was certainly detached from the placenta when it came out.
Well, I wrote it down when you said it because the word caught my attention. You do not recall telling them on direct that the cord just snapped in two
I do remember that, and then I think I corrected myself.
and said that it detached?
It was detached. It was no longer attached. The umbilical cord was attached to her umbilicus, or what we call belly button, went up around her neck a little bit, and was not attached to the placenta. So it came apart.
And what significance do you attach to her statement that the cord was around the baby's neck or up around her neck?
Well, the reason why that's important is babies who have what we call nuchal cord around the neck, especially if they're growth restricted, have decreased amniotic fluid.
Well, we don't know if we have decreased amniotic fluid, correct?
But
if we did.
If we did.
Okay,
Yeah,
go on.
if we did, that cord was tight around the neck, enough around the neck that when she delivered down by the toilet and she tried to catch the head, the cord, so now you have a part of the cord attached to the placenta in the uterus, part of the cord attached to the baby, to the umbilicus around the neck, but those two are not connected. That cord came apart during that process. Babies with IUGR have very small, not very healthy umbilical cords, and that's much more likely to happen, along with the possibility that I didn't, other than saying it was stillbirth, I didn't say that it was an actual cord accident, but one of the causes of cord accident in a stillbirth is a cord accident from that cord being wrapped around the neck real tight that you wouldn't be able to know unless you were monitoring the fetal heart rate during labor.
Which nobody was doing.
Correct.
Nobody was there.
Correct.
You weren't there. Dr. Andrew wasn't there. Dr. Brady wasn't there.
Correct.
She didn't call her parents. She was there alone.
Correct.
So nobody was monitoring this baby.
Correct.
And all those things that you just said, if we had this, we don't know if the amniotic fluids were low because the defendant doesn't even know, correct? Correct.
Correct.
We don't definitively know what color the baby is at this point, correct?
Other than what was said, and I thought it said,
Well, you
I thought
based
it
your
said-
opinion on it being really white,
yeah,
correct?
well, it says white.
I think. I don't know.
Okay.
And now we've got to factor in the cord being wrapped around the baby's neck, correct?
Well, that was just a description.
Doctor, July 14th interview, where you provided the transcript, and this isn't her talking to the detectives, any of the detectives, okay? And I'm going to represent to you that Mr. Richardson is the defendant's father, okay? Okay?
Yes.
Line 13, was the cord wrapped around its neck or anything? Line 15, Skylar. No. Were you provided that excerpt?
Yes.
Did you choose not to attach any significance to her telling her dad that there was no cord wrapped around the baby's neck?
I chose not to use a cord accident specifically with a nuchal cord as the reason for the death because there was conflicting information.
Conflicting information, okay. But you did want to talk about a cord abnormality and it snapping in two, correct?
Well, because I think that was I think that states in those interviews that it was detached.
This is back in the January 14th interview, okay? Or I'm sorry, July 14th. I apologize. Your Honor, if I may have one moment here. This is the January 14th interview, Doctor. Lieutenant Fain asked her, can you remember whether or not she still had the umbilical cord attached to her belly button? I don't remember.
Well, but we knew earlier it was wrapped around her neck and not
Well-
attached to the placenta,
She told her dad it wasn't wrapped around her neck.
or up around the neck.
She told her dad no.
Well, she said, I thought to Carter that it was up by the shoulder near the neck.
So you agree, the 14th it's attached to the baby, right?
I'm sorry?
On the 14th, she has it attached to the baby, correct? Umbilical cord attached to her belly button. I don't remember. It's not detached from the baby, correct?
The umbilical cord was not detached from the baby.
On January 14th, or July 14th.
It was disconnected from the placenta,
From the placenta.
and part of it was up by the neck or the shoulders.
On January 14th, it's attached to her, no cord around her neck, correct?
I understand. We're reading the same things.
It's not detached from her on July 14th, correct?
I never said the umbilical cord was detached from her.
On July 20th. So it still would have been attached then to her. Maybe. I don't think it was attached to her.
The placenta, umbilical cord, baby were not all attached together is my point.
You would agree those statements are not consistent with each other about whether or not it's attached to the baby. That's my first question.
I don't agree with that.
Okay.
Meaning the placenta was not attached.
Do you recall she made a lot of different statements about the cord and the placenta?
There were different statements about the cord and the placenta.
I'm sorry?
There were numerous statements about the cord and the placenta.
Your Honor, if I may have a moment.
Okay.
You agree with regards to the placenta, she made different statements about the timing of when it came out?
Yes,
She initially says it came out the next day,
correct.
then she says it came out with the baby,
Once she was off the toilet.
then she says,
She said she delivered the baby on the toilet,
well, that's what she says.
and she said, I believe, that it came out somewhat later, and then she buried it with the baby.
But originally she said it came out a day later, correct?
Correct,
Which is not consistent with it coming out with the baby.
correct.
You would agree you're attaching a lot of significance to her statements that keep changing about where the cord was located, what it was attached to, when the placenta came out?
I'm weighing them all.
And you're weighing them all in favor of this being a stillborn baby,
Correct,
even though she can't tell you the color of the baby, correct? Not definitively, it's not really white like you reported.
correct,
We don't know whether or not there was a gush of fluids or not.
correct.
We don't know if the placenta came out the day before or the day of or at the same time.
That is a correct statement.
We don't know if the cord was attached to the baby or attached to the placenta or if it snapped in two for that matter, correct?
It was a part. Part of it was attached to the placenta, part of it was attached to the baby up around the shoulder.
And you're standing firm, you believe her when she says it's up around the shoulder,
Yeah, that's what I read.
even though she tells her dad, not a police officer, it was not.
Yes, I read both accounts.
So you pick and choose which ones you choose to believe to support your diagnosis of stillbirth, correct?
I use what I think is pertinent, most consistent with my understanding of the medical aspects of this case. I use them all to formulate the opinion because there was a wide variety of information. I had to make some assumptions on what I believe to be true and not true.
So your report is based on assumptions about what you believe is true and not true?
It's based on my review of all the information I had, based upon my ability to assess with a reasonable degree of medical certainty how Annabelle died.
You don't know the defendant.
No.
You don't know her propensity for truthfulness.
I read the medical records and her history, but specifically, I've never interacted with her.
You only know what information she chooses to share.
I only know of her what I read in the medical reports and reviewing the interviews on the 14th and the 20th and the audio tape and a little bit of the video.
Did you read the transcript where her own parents couldn't tell whether or not she was telling the truth?
Yes.
Did you discount that as well?
No, teenagers do tend to lie and not always tell the truth, so I took that all into account. And she didn't want to tell her parents well, she didn't even tell her parents she was pregnant, so she didn't want to tell her parents the truth.
That's a pretty big lie, isn't it?
That lie happens every day.
Babies being concealed for 9 months,
Yes, it happens.
births occurring in
In the
bedrooms
U.S.
upstairs,
In the U.S., it happens every day.
bodies being disposed of in the backyard.
That doesn't happen every day.
No, it
That's the
doesn't,
first
Doctor.
I've heard of that. But I have heard of them being discarded in trash cans and firehouses and that kind of thing. But they are discarded.
Babies are killed and discarded, correct?
Correct.
And I apologize, doctor, I was having trouble finding it, but the July 20th interview. Detective Carter on line 22, so it still would have been attached to her then? Line 24, Skylar, maybe. I didn't think it was attached to her. Was it still attached to the placenta, do you remember? No, I don't remember. It might have been. That doesn't say it was detached from the placenta, does it?
In that space, the first question was the question of did she cut the cord? And she says she did not cut the cord.
Correct.
The two options for the placenta being delivered, one was the next day, which I didn't think happened, but happened later when she fell off the toilet and got off the toilet.
And again, you're assuming that she was on the toilet.
Correct.
And you're assuming the cord was snapped in two.
Came apart.
And it broke off from the placenta. Correct?
The point is that the umbilical cord is a certain distance, was not attached to the placenta, was attached to the umbilicus up by the shoulder.
Were you there that night, doctor?
No,
Did you see a cord wrapped around baby Richardson's neck?
no.
She told her father it wasn't. You disagree with that?
It was up by the shoulder. It could have been
Says
around.
who?
I thought we went over that earlier where she said that to Carter.
No, I showed you in there where she told her dad it was not.
But I thought before that you showed me where
I
she.
did not.
Let's move on, Ms. Kravitz.
You definitively say that the cord wasn't attached to the placenta. What does Skylar say?
Skylar says no.
Can you read line 12 and 13, please?
I don't remember, it might have been.
Attached to the placenta. And you weren't there, correct?
Correct.
So you only know what she wants you to know, correct?
I only know what I've reviewed in both interrogations and the entire medical record.
And you reviewed this part of the interrogation, as you want to call it, where she says it might still have been attached to the placenta.
I see that, yes.
You disregarded that one too? Didn't attach much weight to it?
weighed it all, yeah.
There's only so much length to that cord, isn't there, doctor?
Correct,
It can only stretch so far, correct, doctor?
correct.
In a typical delivery, you're there easing that baby out.
Correct.
Doctor, I'm going to go back for a second. You said the final thing that you made your decision about this baby being stillborn on was her weight after her pregnancy, correct?
That was one of the things I stated,
Her post-pregnancy weight.
yes,
Usually takes several months for women to get their post-pregnancy weight off, correct?
yes.
Were you aware that in the days preceding her pregnancy, she was already resorting to the use of laxatives?
No,
Do you know what the phrase bossing it up means?
no.
Based upon everything we've just discussed, we no longer have a definitive fundal height. We now have a new conception date. We don't have a really white baby. We don't know what her fluids were at. We don't know whether the cord was attached or not, or what it was attached to. You're still going to stand by your diagnosis that this baby had intrauterine growth restriction and was stillborn?
Yes, ma'am.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Mr. Rickers, redirect.
Yes. Doctor, you recall from, evidently you have a great recall on the transcripts that you've read. Seems like you know page numbers and all that. Do you have a photographic memory or something?
No, I did well in school. Got a pretty good memory.
So doctor, let's talk about this cord and try to put this to rest. Do you remember in these transcripts where Skylar was asked at least 2 times by Detective Fain in that first interview whether she cut the cord?
Yes.
And what was her answer, if you know by your memory?
No.
And that's significant, isn't it?
Yes.
Are you aware that she didn't even know what placenta was during that first interview?
I do recall.
Let me help you, son. I'm sorry to interrupt. You remember when Detective Carter in the second interview said, well, what happened to the placenta? You know, it looks like a big thing of hamburger or meat. You remember that?
Yes, I do. That's why I don't have a photographic memory. I didn't remember it till you told me.
Well, so she didn't really know what the placenta was from that statement. Is that correct?
Correct.
So, based on the fact that she didn't have to cut the cord, which is not in dispute, is it?
Correct.
And I'm talking about from the transcripts. Does it matter that whether the cord was maybe slightly around her neck or whether it was maybe attached to the belly button or maybe attached to the placenta? Does that matter?
No.
What matters is that she didn't have to cut the cord, correct?
And you know, the evidence shows a sequence of events consistent with a stillbirth.
Dr. Ms. Kraft was talking about Dr. Boyce and what she may have said or did say or whatever. I'm going to put on this, is this up? Ready to roll?
Objection.
Council approach. The objection is overruled.
Before we talk about this, which is a page from Skylar's OB visit on April 20, on July 12th. Correct me if I'm wrong, but are medical charts where you as a doctor or you're a medical assistant puts things into that chart, how important is it to be accurate when you put things in a patient's chart?
It's very important.
Is it important because, one, because you're going to rely on that chart later on when you're treating that patient?
And it needs to be honest and factual.
And does it also help you defend yourself if unfortunately you're sued for medical malpractice?
Correct.
And just so everybody's clear, well, let's talk about this that's on the board. This is from Dr. Boyce's notations in the chart. Do you see anywhere where she says anything about bedroom or anything like that?
Not in the note.
Okay. She said she delivered the baby on May 7th, stillborn. She did not tell anybody. Is that, you remember reading?
Yes.
Great. Dr. Ms. Kraft went into a lot of stuff about suicide and what you all do if you're in fear of a patient committing suicide and stuff. We all heard from Dr. Andrew about Skylar's surprised reaction to Dr. Andrew telling her that she is pregnant. And you're aware of that reaction.
Yes.
Dr. Andrew provided an affidavit in this case when we were doing pretrial motions and stuff. And I'm going to put that on the board.
Objection, Your Honor.
The objection is sustained.
May we approach?
You may. Continue, Mr. Rickers.
Dr. Andrew, Dr. White, I apologize. Were you aware that Dr. Andrew, during the third trimester of a woman's pregnancy, all his patients, he always talks to his patients about depression and postpartum depression. You aware of that?
No, I wasn't.
And are you aware that had he thought that Skylar, after that visit on April 26, was going to harm herself or her baby, he would have taken further steps? Were you aware of that?
No, I'm not aware of that. He would have been ethically and the standard of care as you would have to.
So that makes sense.
Yes.
Have you ever known in obstetrics a doctor to do a fundal height measurement for the chart without actually measuring that fundal height with what you guys use, that piece of tape?
You cannot.
And you're aware from the Hilltop records that he put in there that he measured 32 centimeters, is that correct?
That is in there, yes.
And that's part of what you...
That's part of it, yes.
You're also aware that he did an ultrasound while she was there on April 26th?
Yes.
And was he looking for amniotic fluid?
Objection, Your Honor.
Rule to answer if you can.
He did not measure the amniotic fluid.
Did he measure the femur?
There's no record that, there's no record that he measured the amniotic fluid. There's no record that he measured the femur.
And had he done those things, would that be in the record?
Yes, if you do a ultrasound, you're to record and take an image and document all your findings that you do.
Doctor, Ms. Kraft asked you about that second interview about signs of life that they claim was stated by Skylar during that second interview. And if I heard you correctly, you said you did take that into consideration. Is that right?
I'm sorry, can you
I
ask me the
apologize.
question again? Yeah,
Did you saw that interview?
Yes.
You saw the entire interview?
I read, yes.
And you, Ms. Kraft said you discounted those statements about gurgle. Why did you discount that?
Well, I didn't discount it. I waited in coming up with my opinion on the basis of if I thought was medically plausible or not.
Do you remember whether the word gurgle was first used by Skylar or was it used by the police?
It was used first, and I don't remember who used it first, but it was used first by Detective Fain or Detective Carter.
And do you remember whether it was used several times before they finally got her to say that the baby gurgled?
I don't remember the number of times.
Fair enough. What about, did you take into consideration that she said she cremated her baby?
Again, I read all of that and I weighed that in determining what responses were reliable and what were not.
Is it possible to, how much, a baby is what, 75, 80% water?
Yeah, that's a good number. Yes, 75%
Is it possible,
water.
and based on your expertise in the medical field, to light a baby on fire with a lighter put to the foot?
Objection, Your Honor, beyond.
Sustained.
Well, let me ask it. If it isn't possible to light a baby on fire by putting a lighter to it, would you discount that fact?
Objection, Your Honor.
I will sustain the objection as to the scope. The jury will disregard the question.
Let's talk about Ms. Kraft talked about measurements, and one of the measurements was this fundal height measurement of 32 centimeters that Dr. Andrew actually took, correct?
Correct.
Is another measurement the possible date of conception?
Well, that's how if we have a known date of conception, in my practice, it's usually infertility patients that have in vitro fertilization, but if you know the date of conception, that's about the most reliable way to come up with a estimated due date.
So it was an important fact to you in coming and arriving at your opinion that Trey Johnson, the father, said that he and Skylar had sex either the last week in July or the first week in August, correct?
Yes,
And that's how you arrived at 39 weeks gestation when Skylar had that first visit with Dr. Andrew, correct?
correct, using the latest dates possible,
Which was
Being-
August 5th.
being August 7th.
Okay, August. Well, let's use the conception date that I believe you may have originally used based on the anthropologists.
Correct,
Let's use that. That was, I believe you said August 21.
correct.
So using that, giving the prosecution the benefit of the doubt, using that date, when Skylar was seen on April 26 for her first OB visit, Dr. Andrew, how far along was she?
So if her conception date was August 21st, first date of her last menstrual period was August 7th, subtract 3 months, add 7 days, makes her due date May 14th. You subtract 14 days in May, 4 days in April, 18 days prior. So she would have been 37 weeks and 3 days.
And so, using that, and using Dr. Andrews' measurement, in fact, when he did this sonogram, he kind of guessed at 32 centimeters, as I recall, correct?
He just did the fundal height at 32 centimeters and looked at the baby and thought 32 weeks was a reasonable subjective guess,
Doing a sonogram.
doing the sonogram.
But in fact, using the date of August 21st, she was 37 weeks plus a couple days.
Yes,
So that would place her 5 centimeters off, is that correct?
correct.
And that is an issue, isn't it?
Yeah, that would be a positive screen for intrauterine growth restriction.
Doctor, Ms. Kraft showed us all Skylar's statement that white is the color of the baby. White, I think, is what we saw, all of us. Well, she didn't say the baby was purple, did she?
No,
Did she say anywhere that the baby was pink?
no.
She just said white, I think.
That's what I read, yes.
And that's why you relied on it, correct?
Yes.
Doctor, I don't want to belabor the point here. You and I spent some time when I first questioned you about this bulletin from ACOG, the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, right?
Yes.
And not only you, but Dr. Brady, when he was in here Friday, both of you said that obstetricians and gynecologists rely on ACOG, right?
Yes.
The date of that is 2013, reaffirmed for 2018, correct?
Correct.
And Ms. Kraft was questioning you about the medical book that you rely upon, and she pointed out a 1991 study, as if to say that fundal height measurements are only 40% accurate, correct?
Yes, I believe so.
Does this ACOG bulletin that was reaffirmed in 2018, is that the state of the art as we sit here today?
That is still the most updated report on this subject matter, and it's the one that I use in my day-to-day practice.
So you didn't, when you saw this, and when other obstetricians see that, they don't go, oh my, that kind of contradicts what I read in my book when I was in medical school 20 years ago. You don't do that, do you? You rely on the most recent medical information as it's established in the ACOG, right?
ACOG publications carry quite a bit of weight.
And if I recall that, just so that the jury understands and remembers, that ACOG, third page, says something different than what Ms. Kraft is trying to pull out, and that is that fundal height measurements are 65 to 85% reliable in determining whether a baby is growth restricted.
65 to 85% sensitive, which means how many percentage of abnormals you will pick up by a positive screen. Specificity, which means that 96% of normals will be measured as normal.
So the part in the medical book that Ms. Kraft was showing, that's old news.
It's in variance to this.
And it's old
Older,
news.
yes.
And it's not to be relied upon.
I don't, yeah.
Thank you, Doctor.
Ms. Kraft?
Doctor, I want to make sure I just heard you correctly. You don't rely upon a book that you cited as pertinent literature reviewed in the report that you authored on this case?
In this particular instance, I relied more on the updated information than the 1991 study.
Williams Obstetrics Textbook, Volume 17. That's your report, correct?
Yes.
That's Volume 19. It's even more recent than what you relied upon, correct?
Oh, then I don't know if that's in that book.
You don't know if what's in that?
I don't know if that study would be in volume 17. They do change.
They do.
I
And that's a more
assumed it
recent
was
book.
volume 17.
No, we went more.
Then I
current.
can't make any statement about volume 19. I have never reviewed volume 19.
But you do agree that we should go with current literature?
But I didn't utilize volume 19 for my review.
You went even older.
And the point is, I used the updated ACOG information.
What is that section titled?
Screening for fetal growth restriction.
What does screening mean?
Means identify those who are at high risk to have the condition.
And if you do a screen with fundal height, it then talks about ultrasound diagnosis, correct?
Correct.
To assess for fetal growth restriction, 4 biometric measures are commonly used. Number 1, biparietal diameter. Number 2, head circumference. Number 3, abdominal circumference. And number 4, femur length. We don't have those in this case when baby Richardson was alive, do we?
Correct.
And if you suspect, based on your ultrasound or your fundal height, because they're only screening tools, right, doctor? start performing on every single appointment after 24 weeks, correct?
Is that something I got in?
Answer if you can.
Now, I'm sorry, what was the question?
Well, I'm taking it from there, and I'm taking it from your direct testimony that when we first started this afternoon, at 24 weeks, if you've got a concern, you're doing a screen bundle height every single appointment, correct?
No. That's not true.
Doctor, did you not say in the very beginning of your testimony on direct examination, when you have concerns of a growth-restricted baby, after 24 weeks, you measure the fundal height with the tape measure at every single appointment?
I said you measure the fundal height at every single appointment. That's not what I understood your question to be, though.
Because you need to determine if the baby is or is not growing
At-
along the natural curve.
We measure the fundal height at every visit, which is every 4 weeks.
Because even you said you can't definitively say off of one single measurement what that baby's doing.
In the setting of what Dr. Andrews had on April 26th, you could not say.
You could not say, correct. And doctor, one other thing, this ACOG bulletin that we keep wanting to talk about. The purpose of this ACOG is guidance for management and timing of delivery on babies that have been diagnosed with IUGR, correct?
Correct.
We're not even at the point of having a diagnosis on this baby. I want to do some simple math with you, doctor. Let's assume, for sake of argument, even though you've already said, and I want to be clear, you were not given either interview of Dr. Andrew or Dr. Boyce to review, correct?
Correct.
So if Dr. Andrew says in his interview that he used his hands, you don't know, you weren't there, you can't have an opinion on that, correct?
I've stated my opinion that he measured a fundal height in centimeters.
I understand that, but if he is
Beth, I
saying
think
he
we've
used
been over
his...
this issue. Let's move on.
Let's assume for sake of argument we do have a 32 centimeter measurement on April 26th. You yourself said during direct examination that can be off by 3 centimeters, correct?
Correct.
Now we're up to 35 centimeters. You would agree with that?
No, it means that if you measure a fundal height at 32 centimeters and the baby is normally grown, the fundal height would be between 29 centimeters and 35 centimeters.
So it could be up to 35 centimeters, correct, doctor?
The fetus could be up, if it was normally grown, could be up to 35 weeks gestation.
Okay. So it is possible that on April 26th, baby Richardson was 35 weeks gestation.
It's possible, well,
Yes or
baby.
no, doctor?
Yes. No, it's not possible. Because we know what her fundal height was, and she was 37 and a half weeks at that visit. You
No.
asked, was it possible? I said no.
You're assuming that her fundal height was 32 centimeters definitively on that date, correct? That's your assumption.
If I thought you asked a question with the assumption her fundal height was 32 centimeters.
And based on your testimony that that measurement can be off by up to 3 centimeters or 3 weeks, it is possible that on April 26th, she was at 35 weeks gestation, correct?
It's not possible,
It,
because we know her gestation at that point. And she was between 37 and a half weeks and 39 and a half weeks.
and that's your assumption based on your new conception date?
Even the old conception date would put her at 37 and a half.
Doctor, you've changed the conception date to better fit your narrative, isn't that correct?
No, I changed the conception date based on the information in the police report when they interviewed Trey Johnson.
That you did not have when you did that second report.
I disagree with that. I think I would have left it at the original due date of May 14th had I not. I would have not changed it had I not had the information that the conception occurred between July 24th and August 7th. That was the information that I had to change her due date to May 1st.
Because every doctor includes everything in their records, correct, doctor?
That was in no medical record.
It wasn't in your report either, was it?
I-
And certainly, if that document meant that much to you, you would have listed it in your report,
She didn't
correct?
even allow him to answer.
Go ahead and answer if you can.
Correct?
At some point, I received that report and changed the estimated due date based on that interview. I do not recall the exact date I received that information and where it was and when I amended my report, but I can tell you I would not have, I was very comfortable with the original May 14th due date until I received information to change it.
Even if it contradicts what both of the people that were engaged in the sexual act that resulted in the birth of baby Richardson would testify to.
I believe we've covered that that would make me go back to thinking her due date was May 14th.
Doctor, you have testified to several times now. You had Dr. Brady's reports and excerpts that the defense chose to provide to you when you authored your second report, correct? Yes or no, doctor?
Well, if this is my second report, I'm sorry, my second report does not include the new information. You led me to believe that my second report included the new due date, but evidently under two, it's not, because I said she delivered between 38 and 40, with the average being 39. So that was my recollection, that I received that after that, and then changed my due date estimation based on the police report.
Doctor, your estimation for the due date of August 21st was contained in your first report, correct?
The conception date of August 24th, the due date of the 14th of May
Was your first report,
was my first report.
based on scientific examination of the bones.
Correct.
You then received nothing else, including the police report, and you changed the conception date, correct?
Correct. Based on what I
that-
knew
And there's
from the
nowhere,
police interview.
you didn't have the police interview.
But that occurred subsequent to that second report. That's why it's not in that report.
You're saying you don't have anything in this report about the conception?
That, can I see it, please?
Sure.
What exhibit number is that?
It's a defense exhibit, I don't know what it is. I
What's the
don't.
date of the report?
It's the second report.
Thank you.
This report clearly says that the fetal gestational age at time of delivery was between 38 and 40 weeks by femur length, which was referring to the Murray forensic pathology report.
Correct.
I did not know, because I had not yet received the sexual history, to change it. That was subsequent. Further on, I said, had Skylar Richardson or doctor known on April 26th that she had been pregnant for approximately 37 weeks, that would have been a high-risk pregnancy, and say and I say in number 4, a 5-centimeter lag in fundal height at that gestation is significant and highly suspicious for IUGR in this clinical setting. And I stand by this report only to change when I found out the sexual history, which is why I moved the due date to May 1st.
And you found out the sexual history subsequent to authoring that second report.
Correct.
You agree the first report says a conception date of August 21st.
Ask and answer, Judge.
Sustained.
This is your report, Doctor, correct?
Correct.
Likely conception occurred in late July 2016 when nobody is having sex. How is that possible?
It is not in July.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. You can step down. Ladies and gentlemen, I have been advised by the bailiff that we can stay as late as 5:30. Is that, I see general nods of heads, and the attorneys tell me that we can get at least one more witness in that time. We have one bit of technical issues that we have to get set up for our next witness. So, Mr. Mullins, if you could take the jury out. It's not going to be a long break. It's going to be about 5 minutes, and we're going to bring you right back so that we can get this set up. You may be seated. We're ready with Professor Hirsch, right? Okay, we're going to take 2 minutes, so we will be back here at 4:34, and we will have Professor Hirsch in here. Okay.
Right outside.
All right, so like I said, we're going to take about a 2-minute break, and then we'll be right back.
Okay.